Okay, we're going to take a tour of a payslip, and we're going to look at some of the numbers and what's on there and what they all mean. This is a real payslip from a real person. Obviously, we have blanked out some of the personal information to protect her identity. So speaking of personal information, you'll probably have some details on it to make sure it's you and that it's the correct person. Up here, we would have had a staff number or an ID number. What else do we have on here? Now, this payslip will be for a certain, what we call a pay period, usually a week or a fortnight, depending how often you get paid. So it's identifying what time period. This was for a particular week, and once again, we've just left the dates off there to help keep it private. Some information maybe about the award. Now, an award is like a government sort of set of laws around particular industries. So you might be paid under a certain award, and sets out the pay and the conditions and all the things that you can expect both as an employer and an employee that should happen under that award. In this case, it was a Western Australian Drivers Award for a full-time driver. Having a look across the dates, you can see this was Monday the 26th, Tuesday the 27th, and these numbers under here represent the number of hours that were worked on those days as a decimal. You can see here 9.67. Obviously, she didn't work 9 hours 67 minutes because that just doesn't work. There is no 67 minutes in an hour. So it's 9.67. So this would be sort of, more than 9 hours but less than 10. 7.5, which we'll look at shortly, would be 7.5 hours. So it's written in a decimal form. What else do we have on here? Monday, we can see she didn't work at all. 0 hours. So she had Monday off, but I can see she worked on these other 6 days. On Tuesday, she worked 9.67 hours. On Wednesday, 7.5 hours. Now let's have a bit of a zoom in and look at that 7.5 and see how it's made up. You'll see here these other times. I think this was a shift number, if I remember correctly, and these times represent the actual times that Vicky worked. So she started at 14:55. You'll see it's in 24-hour time in this case to avoid any confusion. So we know she started 2:55 in the afternoon, not 2:55 in the morning. And it looks like she finished overall her shift at 23:10, so 11:10 p.m. in the evening. So how long did she work? Well, let's see. From 2:55 to 23:10 is 8 hours and 15 minutes. And you'll see that she had a break. So at 18:50, she stopped the first part of her shift, started again at 19:35. So she had a 45-minute break, which means she worked, if I take 45 minutes away from 8 hours 15, 7.5 hours. And that's awesome. That's where the 7.5 came from. She worked 7.5 hours on that day. Over here, this is just a breakdown now of what hours were ordinary hours. And remember, that's non-overtime. That's no penalty rates. It's just normal, ordinary time. Some of it was time and a half. Some of it might be double time, etc. So it's just listed here what the different categories are of her payments. And let's work our way through. So we can see across the week here, in Vicky's ordinary hours, on Tuesday she did 8.25 or 8.25 ordinary hours, 7.5, 9.75. And if I add those all up, so if I add up those 4 values there, I can see she did 33 ordinary hours in the week. Okay, total hours. Now her rate, her ordinary hourly rate here is 18.0521. So $18.05 an hour for each one of those hours. And if I multiply them together, I get $595.72. So the 33 hours of ordinary time, that component of her pay makes up $595.72. But she's also got some other bits that need to be added into that. She also did some time and a half. So I can see here on Saturday, her Saturday hours, the 7.42 hours that she did, are being calculated at time and a half. And I can tell that because this value here, the 27.07, if I take the ordinary rate and multiply it by that modifier we've talked about in a previous video of 1.5, because it's 1.5 times the ordinary rate, that becomes the new rate for these hours. It's the time and a half rate. Multiply these two together to get the component of her pay that is time and a half, and it happens to be $200. Now, she also did some double time. I can see that on the Sunday here, she did 8.08 hours of double time. And once again, in fact, let me just go back and look at that. So this hourly rate here is double the ordinary rate. So if I take 18.05, double it, I get 36.10. So it's double time rate. She did 8.08 hours multiply them together to get this. Now, she did do this other little piece here, another section of time and a half, NROT. In this case, this stands for non-rostered overtime. Now, it might be different on various pay slips, but under this particular payroll system, there was a code for time and a half work that was done non-rostered overtime. And I can see, if I look on Tuesday here for Vicky, it looks like she did her normal shift, the first part, then the second part. Then there was this little bit where I guess she may have been asked to stay back and cover something. So it wasn't rostered. It was overtime that wasn't rostered. So she gets that bit at that 1 hour 42, or sorry, not 1 hour, 1.42 hours that she was asked to stay back, gets that at time and a half. And you can see that rate here is the same as the time and a half rate. Finally, we've got this separate section here, this early start, late finish. Now, in some awards, there will be a higher percentage of pay for starting before a certain time, early in the morning, or staying late after a certain time in the evening. And in this case, you can see it's a 15% loading. We say it's a loading. It's on top of the ordinary rate. So it's 15% on top of the normal ordinary rate. Now, having a look, she did some of that on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And if I have a look at Tuesday, I can see she started at 5:45 in the morning and she got a quarter of an hour early start. So it must be that anything from 6 o'clock or earlier would get that extra 15%. So she only gets a quarter of an hour because she was only a quarter of an hour before the 6 a.m. start. Okay. On the Wednesday, I can see she didn't start early. In fact, she started at almost 3 in the afternoon, but didn't finish until 11:10 p.m. And she got just over 3.5 hours of late finish, 15% loading. Okay, so it looks like from 7 p.m. 1900 onwards incurs that 15% loading, and she did some late stuff then again on Thursday. So all up, she did 5.67 hours that were either early or late, and here is the 15% loading. So if you take the ordinary rate, multiply that by 0.15, which is a 15%, you will get this as the 15% loading, and multiply them together to get this. So we've got this little table where we've just all the rows, the different rates, and we've worked them out. And so to work out her actual pay, let's just jump forward on that, we take this column and we add it all together. Okay, we've worked out each row on its own, and for each individual piece or component of her pay, and when we add them all together, we get her gross pay of $1142.09. Now, gross pay is the total of all your income before tax and other deductions are taken out. So we call this your gross income. Drop one line and we can see that there is tax taken from that amount of $235. We call this pay-as-you-go tax, or PAYG. It's income tax that you have to pay to the government. The employer holds it. You don't get to see it. They hold it before it goes to your bank account, and they send that to the Australian Tax Office, or the ATO. What is left over, if I take the gross minus the tax and deductions, what's left is your net pay. And that's the bit that actually goes into your bank account. So your gross minus deductions is what you actually get paid. That's what will turn up in your bank account. All right, speaking of bank accounts, we can see that, and obviously we've changed these numbers. These are the bank details. The first 6-digit number here is what we call a BSB, which stands for Bank State Branch. It's an identifier for what bank your pay is going into. And then the next number here is the account number. So it's going into that BSB, that account, and you can see the total of 907.09 is what's going into the bank. Couple more things that are on here. Superannuation. Okay, the details have been blanked out here of her superannuation fund, but $70.43 was sent by the employer into her superannuation fund. Now, superannuation is just it's a percentage of your pay that an employer has to put into a superannuation fund. They legally are required to do it so that when you retire, you've got that superannuation to draw on, so that you've got money to live on when you retire. Okay, and you can access it depending on circumstances, probably from the age of 60, as a guide. That's superannuation. Finally, we can see she's got some annual leave accrued. This is holiday pay or leave. That is by the hours that she's worked over the year. She's got 49 hours of annual leave. So just over a year of annual leave accrued here. And then finally, a little summary that's broken down into two pieces. It's got the gross, the tax, and the net for this pay period. So this one pay slip that we're looking at, but also the year to date. Now, when we talk of year to date, we're talking about the financial year, not January to December. Right, financial year runs from the 1st of July to the 30th of June, so it's offset by 6 months. So there is a quick tour of an actual payslip showing you that breakdown of penalty rates, hours, how the times are calculated, all the important information. So hopefully, you learn something from that. Cheers.